rare and balanced view on politics in today's world. Based on facts, born of rationality, common sense, and logic, providing context on today's events. This is American Perspective with Rick Thomas.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to American Perspective. I am your host, Rick. Hey, yesterday you guys said that you couldn't hear the Lee Zeldin, I think it was, or the Mike Lee. No, Lee Zeldin. Anyway, the video that I was playing, I took a deep dive into my audio cards, and it looks like somehow I inadvertently switched a couple of them programmatically. And so because of that, I ended up messing up the audio. And I just realized I don't have my lights on. So give me just a second here. There we go. And so anyway, so I've got that fixed now. So there you go. Oh, God. Abby, really? Anyway. All right. Let's go ahead and get some things kicked off here. I'm taking a look around at all of the wonderful chats we have over on Facebook. I do see Tommy and Becky. I also have seen Tommy and Becky over on Rumble, as well as Bonnie, US Abby Girl, Bam, Ms. T of Texas, Buddy Weiser. Yeah, Ms. T is also, she's slumming. By that, I mean, they're in both places. And so is Becky. Becky's slumming too. And let's see who else. Oh, I haven't seen my news. My news hasn't popped in. I think has three Chevy shown up? We got a few people missing, it looks like. Yeah. Anyway. All right. Anyway, happy Valentine's Day to those of you who are out there. So that celebrate it. Mrs. Whiskey and I, we kind of haven't in the past, and it's nice and all. It's a great little thing, but our view is always that Valentine's Day should be every day, because you should always respect your spouse. You should always try and get things, for your spouse, do things for your spouse, so on and so forth. The special gifts, they don't necessarily need to always be there. Oh, and I forgot. Mark just popped in over on Facebook. So anyway, that all of that being said, of course, Valentine's Day to us is just like kind of another day. So there you go. I love my wife all the time. It doesn't matter. And I've been critiqued before, because as you'll notice, I don't wear a ring. And part of the reason is because my wedding ring is actually about a half size too small now. But we've tried like other rings and stuff like that. I don't need the ring necessarily to show that I'm married. I know that in my heart, and therefore that's the only place that it really matters, because I'm the only one that necessarily needs to worry about it. I mean, I'm certainly not going to do anything to compromise my marriage, and so there we go. That's what it is. Okay. Well, enough about that. All right, let's move on. Tonight we have Amy. Amy is our leader for the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you are of mine, please stand, remove your hat if you're wearing one, and place your hand over your heart and join in with Amy as she recites the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And of course, I thank you, Amy, for sending in that wonderful rendition of the pledge. Do me a favor, if you want to hear your rendition of the pledge played here on the program, all you need to do is record yourself performing it in your style or reciting it in your style, either way, and then take that audio, video, whatever kind of file, attach it to an email, send it off to me, send it to fans, FANS, at AmericanPerspective.online. That's fans, FANS, at AmericanPerspective.online. All right. Tonight's headline sponsor is... Oh, they didn't come up. Here we go. Is theflagshirt.com. Now, you've seen me wear their shirts almost every single episode. Okay. And I'm wearing one actually right now. I'm wearing the Mount Rushmore, We the People shirt. And so right now they are on the tail end of their President's Day sale. President's Day is Monday, is this Monday. And, if, side note really quick, if you are planning on flying a flag on President's Day, it goes to the top of the pole. It's not a half-staff thing on President's Day. I just got a Betsy Ross, very well-made quality from, I think it's U.S. Flag Company. But anyway, I've got my Betsy Ross, and I'm going to go and throw up my Betsy Ross out there because that was the one that was commissioned by General George Washington back during the Revolutionary War. So, anyway, to get back to theflagshirt.com, go to theflagshirt.com, check out their President's Day sale. They have up to 50% off selected styles. You can go and check it out. Head on over there and take a look at all of their offerings. If you purchase $75 or more, of course, you get free shipping. But I know everybody can't purchase $75 or more of the stuff. It just so happens that maybe, your little things are a little tight still. And that's fine. So I am going to help you out. What you do is you go to flagshirt.americanperspective.online. Go to flagshirt.americanperspective.online. And when you are there, what you end up with is you'll get a coupon code that you can copy and paste into the promo box at checkout at theflagshirt.com and get yourself $5 off your order on American Perspective. Go to flagshirt.americanperspective.online, copy and paste the promo code that you were presented with, drop it in the promo code box at checkout at theflagshirt.com, and you can get yourself a $5 off your order. Go to theflagshirt.com and get yourself patriotized. All right. Yeah, I like their shirts. I like the, at least I really dig the men's cotton polos. It's what I wear all the time. Well, occasionally what'll end up happening is you'll have some Democrat moron like Chuckles Schumer, who goes and thinks he's going to outsmart the people of America. He thinks he's going to outsmart the mega patriots that are out there. He and he alone is going to outsmart all kinds of Americans and patriot-loving Americans, that is. So what does he do? He decides that since, Doge is in place and all this other stuff, he is going to go and set up a whistleblower portal. Now, he does it on the web, and he puts in X, here's the post that he put out. He says, "Today I'm calling on our brave public servants. I'm launching a new portal for anyone who wants to expose corruption, abuses of power, and threats to the public safety with the legal protections of being a whistleblower." Okay, that's what he puts out. And he has a link in it that is supposed to go to some whistleblower website. Well, you just got to laugh whenever this crap happens. According to the Daily Fetched. Okay. According to the Daily Fetched. He became the victim of his own website. He thought that a snitch line was going to somehow thwart President Donald Trump and Elon Musk's efforts to root out wasteful spending, fraud, or criminal activity, and also be able to describe the conduct. However, the very first, well, I don't know if it's the very first person, but somebody and a few others have been filing things on Chuck Schumer. For an example, if you remember, 5 years ago, Schumer offered the thinly veiled threat against the conservative members of the Supreme Court over their decisions regarding the abortion case. That was the Dobbs decision. He said, "I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you have released the whirlwind and you will pay the price. You won't know what hit you if you go forward with these awful decisions." You remember that? Oh, yeah, that was like transmitted all over on CNN and everything. Well, Molly Hemingway, editor-in-chief of The Federalist, used the snitch line to report those remarks under the category of retaliation. Oh, yeah. Yep. Yeah, they thought they were going to be quick. Others who followed along were quick to note the remarks on the snitch line and said, one commenter on the thread said, "I just submitted a complaint. I hope you guys actually do your jobs and address it." Another added, "I'd like to report Chuck Schumer for threatening sitting Supreme Court justices. It's all on video," which, by the way, that is illegal. Okay, that is illegal. A third ex-user shared an abuse of power and a threat to public safety in the form of a picture that everybody knows right here. This one. Good old Chuckles sitting on the grill and grilling up raw burgers. I don't even think that grill was turned on. I mean, seriously, there's like, he's got cheese on the top of one of these raw burgers. Like, he doesn't even know what the heck. Seriously? I mean, come on. Well, I mean, let's face it. None of these people have worked at McDonald's except for, well, reportedly Kamala, but we don't know that for certain. Anyway, his snitch line is totally backfiring. Oh, my gosh. And yeah, actually, Bonnie points out, and I forgot about this, but Bonnie, you can point out that Maxine Waters was having a problem for that. So anyway, yeah, I guess you can go to, I'm not sure exactly where the portal is. I think let's just go ahead and do this live. Let's see where this thing goes here. It goes to democrats.senate.gov/whistleblowers. And for those of you who don't know the difference between the / and the /, it's the question mark key. But this is where it goes. And here is the page. You can put in your information, the organization that you come from, what's the nature of the complaint, whether it's retaliation, wasteful spending, fraud, criminal activity, etc. Agency or organizations involved, and then explain the whistleblower complaint. Oh, and I guess you have to verify that you're not a robot, by the way. They have a CAPTCHA here. E-CAPTCHA. Yeah. I might get curious. I might just do something. I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, so there you go. Once again, go to democrats.senate.gov. and that is Democrats with an S, .senate.gov, /whistleblowers. Oh, Chucky boy. Chucky. Yeah, these guys, they always freaking... Oh, anyway. All right. Well, so Trump announced his reciprocal tariffs plan. He went ahead and put it out there, and he's announcing it mainly just because people need to understand. I mean, these are tariffs, okay? These are tariffs that other countries have had on us for years. And it's essentially what he's doing here. Again, like I pointed out, his use of tariffs is to bring people to the bargaining table. That's what he ultimately uses tariffs for. And don't get me wrong, tariffs are a tax. They definitely are a tax. All right. But in this particular case, he's essentially saying that, hey, if some other country, like, I don't know, let's say Mozambique, okay, if they charge us a tariff on our products in Mozambique, and that tariff is 15%, then what we're going to do is we're going to put a 15% tariff on your products coming in. It's only fair. Just makes things go to zero. I mean, on the balance sheet anyway. Which is the whole point, right? I mean, Donald Trump is all about making things fair. Now, keep in mind, the actual impact of that will depend on how many products are being sold here in the U.S. from the other country versus how many products are being bought over in their country. As I've pointed out, there is a trade deficit across many of these countries that they purchase more products from us than we do from them. And so their particular situation is that we're in the driver's seat for all of this. And so anyway, Trump made a comment. He was speaking from the Oval Office yesterday. He confirmed that he will implement a matching tariff on whatever amount countries charge the United States. He told reporters it works out very well. It's beautiful, simple system, and we don't have to worry about charging too much or too little. He said that the tariffs could go into effect as early as April 2nd, following the completion of a study. Howard Lutnick, Trump's nominee for Secretary of the Department of Commerce, said while speaking alongside in the president in the Oval Office. So here's the 5 key takeaways about Trump's plan that he's got going on. Number 1 is that reciprocal tariffs are more likely to affect emerging market economies such as Brazil, India, Vietnam, and several Southwest Asian and African countries, as many of these countries currently maintain a wider tariff gaps. World Bank data from 2022 indicate, for example, that India's weighted average effective tariff rate on the United States was about 9.5%. The average U.S. tariff rate on India's products entering our country is about 3%. Okay. So, so that's an imbalance. So anyway, the point being is that he also was making those comments with regards to India in particular and the tariffs right before his meeting with the Indian Prime Minister at the Oval Office. And so they were talking about it. And actually, the Indian Prime Minister mentioned in his speech that, yeah, that seems quite fair. So they're going to be working together, by the way, in order to mutually benefit both India in terms of things like energy production and, believe it or not, exports from the U.S. India has kind of made some overtures into purchasing things like oil and natural gas from us. President also, during that time, singled out Taiwan, saying that all chip production had moved to Taiwan from the United States and that he wanted to bring that manufacturing back to the country. Now, keep in mind, remember how I was telling you there was that wonderful chip that chip manufacturing plants that Biden kept touting? And no, they were making the raw materials, they were making the raw chips, but that they were being sent back to Taiwan for finishing. And so even though the manufacturing plant, it had a little bit of a benefit, it wasn't as much of a benefit as what the Biden administration was attempting to tout. Okay. So anyway, so we'll just have to see what's going on there. But in 2023, Taiwan's overall average nominal tariff rate for imported goods was 6.34%, ranging between 4.13% for industrial products and 15.06% for agricultural products. So, well, that's reciprocal tariffs there. Another thing that he has talked about with this is that the BRICS nations, now this is key, okay? So BRICS stands for it's an acronym for a group of emerging markets: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Now, these folks have been attempting to usurp the U.S. dollar as the world's reserve currency. And these countries have been championing anti-U.S. dollar initiatives, including setting bilateral trade in what they have as local currencies. Okay. Well, the president says that BRICS nations may face 100% tariffs. And he, on the 13th, he declared that BRICS is dead. Now, for those of you that don't know, the ability for the U.S. dollar to act as the world's reserve currency actually bolsters the dollar. Okay. And it's also part of the reason why whatever happens here in the U.S. in terms of the value of the dollar, if the value of the dollar and our inflation goes up, the world's inflation goes up. That's something that these leftist people, were complaining about quite a bit during COVID. They were like, oh yeah, inflation's going up all over the world. Well, of course, inflation was going up all over the world. Reason being is because most of the world was using the U.S. dollar, which was inflating due to the spending by the Biden administration. There you go. So anyway, Trump has taken aim to BRICS. And he told reporters during this press conference that BRICS was established for a bad purpose. But now that the members refrain from discussing the anti-dollar bloc. Again, they're afraid to talk, and this is what Trump said. They're afraid to talk about it because I told them if they want to play games with the dollar, then they're going to be hit with a 100% tariff. And he said, we have them over a barrel. So, yeah. Now, some observers say that they believe that Trump's tariff strategy may push other nations to diversify from the dollar. But let's be honest here. I mean, you either diversify from the dollar and get hit with a buttload of tariffs, or you don't diversify from the dollar and things go on in an even keel situation. Which do you think those countries are really going to do? Anyway. Yeah, they're not They're not going to. Yeah. Anyway, Trump singles out the EU's value-added tax. So that's the European Union's value-added tax, which is a consumption tax applied to each stage of the production and distribution process on all domestic and imported goods and services purchased and sold during the part of the trade bloc. Now, a VAT, by the way, differs from a sales tax because the sales tax is charged at the point of sale. The VAT tax is being done at every single stage of either shipment or production, going all the way from the original producing location all the way out to when the consumer picks up the product. And that includes, by the way, that includes things like restaurants too, because it goes all the way to the point of where, and I experienced this in my trips to England, was the VAT tax being added to, the food being served to me at a restaurant, just as an example. Okay. So anyway, Lutnick called it an export subsidy because the EU will not drop the VAT when it sells to the United States. And Lutnick told reporters, so we are going to address each country one by one, but here's the key. They'll get an invitation to trade with the greatest consumer economy in the world. In exchange for trading with the greatest consumer economy in the world, you have to treat us the way we are going to treat you. So U.S. cars, by the way, that are shipped to the EU are subject to a 10% tariff. In contrast, European cars entering the United States face a 2.5% levy. Now, if the VAT is taken into consideration, according to the piece here in the Epic Times that I'm reading from, the countries will see a jump in U.S. tariffs will be India, Argentina, South Africa, and the European countries, according to a Deutsche Bank analysis. Now, some of the products, by the way, that are going to be affected the most by this fair and reciprocal plan is essentially going to be things like shellfish coming to America. It's going to be things like Brazil's ethanol exports. There's going to be pharmaceuticals and semiconductors could also be affected. So pharmaceutical products, by the way, have been the top U.S. import from the EU in recent years. And as a result, these tariffs could significantly affect the drug and medical sector, which includes weight loss medications and surgical instruments. So, yeah. So there's some things that are going to happen here. And Trump did say, by the way, that prices could go up in the short term. All right. However, prices will go down. And he basically warns Americans. He's like, Americans should prepare for some short-term pain, but ultimately prices will stay the same or go down. While he said he believes, and this, excuse me, this is Trump. While he said he believes there could be some short-term disturbance, he said that the United States will benefit in the long run. He believes that these tariff policies are going to create more employment in the United States, because obviously some of these countries are going to like slide around and try to produce more here in the U.S., obviously. And last month, by the way, the Federal Reserve kept interest rates unchanged. And the latest inflation reports, which I'll get to here hopefully toward the end of the program, have prompted investors to rethink their monetary policy expectations. The futures market is penciling in a next quarter point interest rate for September. So, yeah. So we'll have to see where things are going to go with this in terms of all that. But that was mostly his plan for the tariffs, the reciprocal tariffs. And I mean, it just makes sense. It's common sense. I mean, seriously, common sense. No. Is anybody okay? So Julie P80 is saying that I keep cutting out. Anybody else having audio issues for tonight? Anybody? No, it looks like Bonnie has already said that she's fine. Anyone else? Am I doing okay sound wise? Anything? Anyway. All right. Well, I'll keep going until people respond to that. All right. So here in Breitbart, there was a poll taken. Now, let me go ahead and show it to you. So there was a poll taken, and the majority of likely voters approve of Elon Musk running Doge. This is a Thursday poll from Rasmussen Reports reveals. So the survey asked respondents, do you approve or disapprove of Elon Musk being in charge of the Department of Government Efficiency? Across the board, 55% approve. Among those, 38% strongly approve. Another 46% disapprove. And among those, 37% disapprove strongly. You can kind of guess where that is. The piece says Republicans approve the most, with 84% approving of Musk leading Doge, compared to 55% of independents and, of course, just a very simple 28% of Democrats that do. Most Democrats, however, 71%, of course, disapprove. Well, that's because they're getting their asses handed to them by this. So anyway, so it looks like, at least for the most part, many Americans, vast majority, are enjoying what's going on with this, with what's happening. So that's cool. All right. So for anybody who has gone through an audit on, from the IRS, this next news might make your day. So apparently Trump has now stated, and by the way, Doge is actually in the IRS. They arrived at the IRS yesterday, but the IRS is going to be audited by the Department of Government Efficiency. Trump told reporters yesterday that the Internal Revenue Service will be looked at like everyone else. He said that just about every federal agency will be examined by Doge. He also said they're doing a hell of a job. It's an amazing job that they're doing. I call it the force of super geniuses, but it's building. And they go up and they talk to some of the people about certain details and they get all tongue-tied because these people get it. They're very smart people. We need smart people. The IRS declined to comment. So anyway, Trump was responding to a question about how Doge reportedly arrived at the IRS on Thursday and was asked whether he wanted to close the IRS. Now, Trump did say that he did not expect the IRS, which is currently processing 2024 taxes, to be shuttered. Okay, so here's the thing, all right? And I don't think a lot of people, really understand this. Congress has the constitutional authority to lay and collect taxes. That is item number 1 in Article 1, Section 8. That money is supposed to go to the items that Congress is supposed to be legislating on, okay, in terms of Article 1, Section 8. Congress has passed that over to the Internal Revenue Service. Now, there's some questions, okay, as to whether or not that is actually constitutional, because the Constitution doesn't say Congress shall make these laws and then pass off their responsibility or shirk their responsibility. But no one's ever bothered to really question that. So the mere fact that the IRS is even being audited by the executive branch, sorry, I had to take a drink there, is somewhat questionable, because the IRS falls under the Department of the Treasury. The Department of the Treasury is a part of the executive branch, but yet the IRS is doing Congress's job. So it's sort of, shall we say, convoluted in terms of how and whether or not the IRS is actually under Congress or under the executive. And nobody has ever really questioned that, as far as I know. Nobody has ever taken that to the courts to basically say, hey, wait a minute. Here it says Congress is supposed to do this. Congress can't necessarily delegate that out. And that certainly isn't a task that's supposed to go to the executive branch, because Congress has the power to lay and collect taxes. That would be an interesting conundrum, and actually an interesting legal discussion to totally have in this entire situation. Because, yeah, well, let's just say a lot of people don't like the IRS. I'm one of them. 16th Amendment is the one that talks about the income taxes and being able to tax income, which is, it's even questionable. I mean, there are arguments that could be made that it was improperly, even though it's already been vetted out through the courts, that it was improperly ratified. But, I mean, the courts have kind of upheld it. So the question now becomes whether or not this stuff is whether or not Doge is going to find anything, number one. But number two is whether or not they are going to have some legal responses, which I would hope would start digging into some of those questions with regards to where does the IRS actually sit? Because again, Congress is in charge of the money. Congress mints the money. Congress is supposed to lay and collect the taxes. Sounds like this is all a legislative part of the job for it. Anyway. On Thursday, also, senior IRS executives were instructed to identify all contracts that were non-essential and set them up for termination, according to an internal email. So the email said that the General Services Administration, which manages most government contracts, is demanding they review consulting contracts under their purview and determine whether or not they can be justified. The GSA deems a contract non-essential if it, quote, merely generates a report, research, coaching, or an artifact, the email says, consistent with the goals and directives of the Trump administration to eliminate waste, reduce spending, and increase efficiency. GSA has taken the first steps in a government-wide initiative to eliminate non-essential consulting contracts. GSA also did not respond to a request for comment by the time this got published in the Epoch Times. Well, we've heard about all of these wonderful spending boondoggles that have been going on throughout the, especially during the Biden administration years. For an example, okay, you had the whole, we're going to electrify the entire country and we're going to build, you know, I can't remember the number, 500,000, 50,000, something like that, stations, okay, across the country. Well, they also said that all of that was going to happen fairly quickly, and they only built like 7 or 8 under Pete Buttigieg. Well, here's another boondoggle. This in the Daily Economy. 42 billion broadband boondoggle brought internet to exactly 0 homes. 0 homes. Wow. Yep. So they called it the BEAD program, which stands for Broadband Equity, Access, and Deployment. It was allocated 42 billion, yes, that's billion with a B, to extend broadband access to all homes nationwide. Nearly 3 years after passage, 16 states still have not received funding approval. In its first 3 years, the program connected precisely 0 homes to the internet. So, further on down here in the piece, I caught this and I just was like, oh my gosh. So check this out. The per household cost of this federal solution, okay, to fix what is already a diminishing problem is apparently pretty damn steep. So the 42 billion price tag is sufficient to provide 12 years worth of Starlink service. That's $44,000 for each impacted household. Even if we presume that all the 24 million households currently without access will benefit from increased access and affordability, this comes out to $1,750 per household. So the cost per taxpayer of BEAD is simply added to our massive federal credit card balance, meaning the debt. Marginal negative impact so distant that it is barely discernible. But that's the ugly truth of these things. Okay, dispersed cost, concentrated benefits. A handful of broadband infrastructure companies stand to benefit immensely from these widely dispersed costs. Taxpayers foot 75% of the cost of the capital investments from which these favored companies will generate revenue for decades to come. So here's the thing. All of this is actually a pretty good chunk of this is going to go into things such as backbone infrastructure to deliver internet to these far-flung rural locations. And that's what this piece is attempting to point out, that they could easily have just packed up Starlink and sent it out to these places. And they even call it out. They say the private sector has already developed an alternative to high capital expenditures for building our expensive infrastructure, serving only a sparse numbers of people in rural areas. It's called Starlink. Starlink covers the entirety of the lower 48 states at a cost of just $120 per month for essentially unlimited residential use. Typical download speeds easily exceed the FCC's 25 megabits per second threshold for unserved and often exceeds the FCC's requirement of 100 megabits threshold for underserved communities. They would have essentially saved money. And Elon, if you recall, did call this out one time. They could have saved money and gotten all of these people hooked up in record time just by putting that money into Starlink and saying, hey, let's just send all this out for this. Okay. So anyway, now I have checked into Starlink because I have been thinking of using it as a backup for when I lose internet connectivity here at the studio. My biggest challenge, of course, is the fact that I live in such a high latitude in comparison that the number of satellites that service my area, I have to have pretty much a complete view of the sky in order for it to work properly without any bumps and downtime. And unfortunately, where I live, we have a lot of tall trees that are 60 feet or higher. And so therefore, my choices of where I can set up the dish are very, very few and far between. Also, too, that I also have found out that as far as like doing streaming like this is sort of questionable. Now, streaming is a misnomer. You need to understand that when you guys are downloading stuff from the internet, like watching Netflix or whatever, that actually goes through a process where it buffers a certain amount of the audio video file, and then it presents that audio video to you. And then once it reaches a certain point, the computer will then go and buffer it again and get the next segment or whatever it is. Okay. And the biggest challenge, of course, for me as a streamer is the fact that I'm sending my data to a server, which that server, of course, is doing some processing and then sending it out to all of you. That's more of my connection going to the server is more of a direct connection and needs to be literally as bump free as possible. You guys have seen this on my broadcasts. When I've had problems streaming, sometimes it ends up causing all of you the same issue, same issues across the board. So Starlink, while it's great for doing things like surfing the internet, maybe doing, for an example, a buffered download from Netflix or something along those lines, it's not exactly all that conducive to a live 100% video broadcast, such as what you see here. So, yeah. Anyway. Basically, here's another one of those boondoggles that are out there for this. So, pretty much. All right. Let's see. So, there's a piece in the Federalist that kind of goes through and talks a little bit about how Trump and Vance are not defying the Constitution. And in fact, they are actually following it. If you get a chance, I would suggest that you read through it completely. But I want to hit a couple of highlights here because the Democrats and their pundits and all the pundits that are out there have suggested and exaggerated Vice President J.D. Vance's remarks about the constitutional crisis. So what J.D. Vance said was literally this: if a judge tried to tell a general how to conduct a military operation, that would be illegal. If a judge tried to command the attorney general in how to use her discretion as a prosecutor, that's also illegal. Judges aren't allowed to control the executive's legitimate power. He's right. Okay. It does, those words right there do nothing more than illustrate the separation of powers under the Constitution. The legislative branch creates the laws. The executive branch implements and executes and enforces said laws. And the judicial branch decides whether or not the laws are constitutional or not. I mean, that's pretty much Articles 1, 2, and 3 in order in the Constitution. Okay? Now, the Constitution basically states that the only time the legislative branch, meaning the Congress, can get involved with the other two branches is when high crimes or misdemeanors occur. They give Congress the power of impeachment. And that basically means that you go and not criminally try them, because this is not necessarily a criminal trial, although they can refer after impeachment, they can refer the person over to, or the case over to the DOJ to see if they are going to be criminally charged. But this is more of a, shall we say, political scenario, not so much a criminal scenario. So, anyway, the thing about this is that the piece goes through a few examples and things like that. And in particular, they're referencing the injunctions. So here, this example, during the Vietnam War, Representative Elizabeth Holtzman sued to stop the bombing of Cambodia, which President Nixon had ordered. Holtzman obtained an injunction from a district court, and the Court of Appeals immediately stayed the district court order. Holtzman petitioned to the Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall, who oversaw that particular Court of Appeals, to vacate the stay. Marshall refused, writing that the proper response to an arguably illegal action by Nixon is not lawlessness by judges charged with interpreting and enforcing the laws. Holtzman then reapplied to the liberal Justice William Douglas, who rejected the executive's argument that reimposing the ban on bombing would cause a constitutional confrontation. Douglas then ordered the military to stop the bombing. Military ignored Douglas's order. Douglas's colleagues on the court immediately overturned his unconstitutional order, and no federal court has ever attempted to stop military hostilities, or, for the critics of Vance that would have to accept this, ordered for them to begin. Now, the thing about it is this is the case. There's a lot to be said about whether or not the Constitution, first of all, gives the ability of the court system, especially the lower courts, the ability to just do what is called a blanket or universal injunction. There is a question there with that. And I've discussed it on this program. We've talked about it in length. There is no constitutional, and even Clarence Thomas questions this. There's nothing constitutionally, there's nothing statutorily that would allow for a district court to issue an injunction, a blanket injunction like this. So, all of that being said, the question now has come up for these judges who have been issuing these unconstitutional injunctions as to whether or not judicial impeachment is warranted. And that brings us to this article in the Epoch Times, discussing judicial impeachment, how it works, and of course, why it's in the spotlight today. So the Constitution does indicate that federal judges can be impeached and removed from office for the same things that the president, or anyone else really, can be: treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. Okay? So this, again, is a call from several of these, several officials who have talked about activist judges from the bench Several of Trump's administrative policies to reduce federal spending and downsize the government have been tied up in the courts, where judges have issued orders and rulings to block or slow the policy's execution. Now, again, the only court constitutionally that has the kind of power that these district courts and lower courts are attempting to take on is the Supreme Court. That's the only one that can check the power of the executive branch or the legislative branch. This is part of the reason why it goes from the lower courts all the way up to the Supreme Court, oftentimes. And by the way, that isn't set in stone. You can, and many have in the past, appeal or put in a writ of certiorari directly to the Supreme Court. It doesn't have to go through the lower courts, although that is a typical process. Okay? Now, Elon Musk brought it up on X, and he says we must impeach judges who are grossly undermining the will of the people and destroying America. It's the only way. I tend to would agree with that. If they are going against the Constitution, they should be. Okay? The practice, often referred to as legislating from the bench, has been seen as judges taking upon themselves a duty to correct what they perceived to be an unacceptable move by the executive or legislative branches. So, yeah. Apparently, Representative Andrew Clyde from Georgia announced earlier this week on the 12th his intention to file articles of impeachment against federal judges who blocked President Trump's federal funding freeze. He wrote on X, "I'm drafting articles of impeachment for U.S. District Judge John McConnell Jr. He's a partisan activist weaponizing our justice system to stop President Trump's funding freeze on woke and wasteful government spending. We must end this abusive overreach." In an earlier post, that same gentleman said that there was a constitutional crisis taking place at the judicial branch. And he's not wrong. Now, do I honestly think that any of this is really going anywhere? I don't know. But it does bring up a very, very valid point, which is that having these lower courts, which weren't even, they're not even outside of being named lower courts, such as Congress shall deem necessary and proper, and, you know, basically indicating that Congress can make these courts and destroy these courts pretty much at will, with the only court that is untouchable by Congress being the Supreme Court. I think we're going to run into a situation where the Supreme Court's going to have to make a choice and say, hey, look, these injunctions that are being put out, these blanket injunctions, these universal injunctions, yeah, they're not constitutional. That the judiciary itself doesn't have the ability to do that across a broad base. And this has already been tried, by the way, in the Supreme Court before. The Supreme Court, I told you about it already, that the Supreme Court basically said that the blanket orders, I mean, granted, the whole case was rescinded, but the blanket orders was even questionable. Injunctions are supposed to provide relief, direct relief, for the parties involved in the case, not necessarily a blanket relief for everyone and people who haven't even been named in it or even looked for, by the way, looked for injunctive relief. So the only constitutional crisis that these Democrat morons are bringing to the table is a constitutional crisis of the judiciary stepping outside of its bounds. That's where we're at with the constitutional crisis. All right, folks, that is it for me for this evening. Do me a favor, if you haven't already, head on over to rumble.com, get yourself an account. It is free. Once you are signed up and signed in, make sure you search up the American Perspective channel and hit that green follow button to get notified every time I go live. Also, too, on your way out, don't forget to hit those thumbs ups. Okay? Thumbs up and like buttons across all of my platforms, whether it's X, Facebook, YouTube, and of course, the aforementioned Rumble. We will see you tomorrow night. Tomorrow night is Saturday, so that's 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, 1 hour later, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on American Perspective. Enjoy the rest of your Valentine's Day. Get treated to something nice. And we'll see you tomorrow. Good night, everybody.